When grieving parents began noticing strange signs at their son's grave, wilted flowers replaced, a toy always moved, they thought it was just their imagination. But when they installed a camera to find the truth, what they saw in the footage turned their blood cold. This isn't just a ghost story. It's something far darker. It had been 6 long, soul-crushing months since Ethan and Marissa lost their 8-year-old son, Caleb, in a tragic car accident. The grief was unbearable, like a permanent shadow hanging over their lives. Every Sunday, without fail, they visited his grave, bringing fresh flowers, wiping down the tombstone, and talking to him as if he were still listening. Caleb had been the light of their lives, a cheerful boy who loved dinosaurs, comic books, and especially his favorite action figure, Captain Nova. One stormy evening, as thunder rumbled low in the distance and raindrops tapped gently on their umbrella, they arrived at the grave for their usual visit. Marissa froze. The action figure, Captain Nova, which she had carefully placed facing the tombstone days earlier, was now lying several feet away, upright, staring toward the woods. It wasn't knocked over. It was deliberately moved. The ground around the grave looked slightly uneven, as if the soil had been disturbed recently. It was subtle, but noticeable to grieving parents who knew every inch of their child's resting place. Ethan knelt to inspect the ground. The soil was soft, too soft, despite the rain. No animal tracks, no signs of digging tools. Just a faint indentation, almost like a small handprint. They stared at each other, both unsettled but unsure of what to say. Maybe it was just the weather. Maybe a squirrel or raccoon had dragged the toy. They tried to rationalize it. But as they turned to leave, Marissa glanced back one last time. And for a split second, she could have sworn she saw a small shadow dart behind a nearby gravestone. They didn't speak of it that night, but neither of them slept. In the following weeks, the unease only deepened. Every time Ethan and Marissa visited Caleb's grave, something was off. One Sunday, they found a fresh bouquet of lilies, Caleb's favorite, placed neatly by the headstone. But neither of them had brought flowers that week. The next visit, a small paper airplane sat beside the tombstone, folded in the exact way Caleb used to make them. The paper was dry, unwrinkled, untouched by rain, impossible for something left outdoors for more than a few hours. Then came the toys. Captain Nova, the action figure, started appearing in new positions with each visit, sometimes sitting upright, sometimes facing backward, once even buried halfway into the soil with only its head sticking out. Once, it was missing entirely. They searched frantically, thinking someone had stolen it, only to find it the next day back in its place, but eerily clean, too clean, as if it had been washed. It wasn't just the objects. One afternoon, as they were leaving, Ethan paused and looked down. The soft earth near the grave held a faint impression, a small, barefoot footprint. It was the size of a child's. No other marks surrounded it, no adult prints, no signs of someone approaching or leaving. Just a single, lonely print facing the grave. They asked the groundskeeper if anyone had been visiting the site, perhaps another grieving child or a local prankster. But the man shook his head. "Nobody comes out here except you two," he said, frowning. "And if they do, they don't stick around after sunset. Not near that grave." Ethan and Marissa were no longer just grieving. They were becoming afraid. Whatever was happening wasn't random. It was intelligent. It was deliberate. And it felt familiar. The tension had reached its peak. Ethan, a former tech consultant, decided to take matters into his own hands. He bought a high-definition, motion-activated trail camera, one designed for night vision and wildlife surveillance. Under the cover of dusk, he carefully hid it among the bushes facing Caleb's grave. It was subtle, nearly invisible unless someone knew it was there. For 3 nights, the camera recorded. Nothing happened the first 2 nights, just the wind rustling leaves, a fox wandering by, and the occasional flicker of lightning in the distance. But on the third night, the motion sensor triggered at exactly 3:17 a.m. When Ethan downloaded the footage and sat beside Marissa to watch it, they expected to see maybe a trespasser or an animal. What they saw instead made Marissa scream and drop the laptop. The grainy footage showed a small figure, no taller than a child, slowly walking into frame. The child was barefoot, wearing nothing but a pair of torn pajamas, the same dinosaur pattern pajamas Caleb used to wear. His skin looked pale, almost bluish under the night vision lens. His head was tilted unnaturally to one side, and his movements were stiff, like he was struggling to walk. He stopped at the grave. Kneeling down, the figure placed something, a toy, carefully on the tombstone. Then he leaned forward, lips moving as if whispering. There was no audio. And then, the boy looked up, directly at the camera. His eyes glowed faintly in the infrared. Slow, unsettling smile spread across his face, one that looked too wide, too forced. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the boy stood and walked backward into the darkness, vanishing into the trees beyond the cemetery's edge. The footage ended there. Ethan and Marissa sat in stunned silence. They played it again and again. There was no mistaking it. It was Caleb, or at least, it looked like him. But whatever that thing was, it moved like something that didn't belong in this world. The image of the pale boy looking into the camera haunted them. Ethan, once a skeptic, found himself waking up in cold sweats. Marissa stopped sleeping altogether. They both knew what they saw, but the world around them refused to give it meaning. Friends called it a glitch, a trick of light. Some even accused them of being too deep in grief, hallucinating what they wished to see. But they weren't looking for comfort. They were looking for truth. Desperate, Ethan reached out to a local priest who had once blessed their home. They invited him over, showed him the footage on a secure drive. The moment the priest saw the child's face, his expression shifted from concern to horror. He crossed himself and stepped back. "That's not your son," he whispered, almost trembling. "It wears his face, but it isn't him." He warned them never to return to the grave after dark. "There are things that mimic the living," he said. "Spirits, echoes, things far older than us. They take on familiar shapes to lure us." His words left them shaken but still unsatisfied. So they sent the footage to a paranormal investigator from out of state, a woman known for her work with unexplainable hauntings. She analyzed the video frame by frame. Then she called them in the middle of the night. Her voice was serious, professional, but shaken. "I ran a thermal scan over your footage," she said. "There's no heat signature. That child, it emits no warmth. And the way it moves, frame by frame, it's skipping time. It's not walking naturally. It's phasing." She paused. "There's something else. When I enhance the audio, there's a whisper just before the boy disappears." Ethan's heart pounded. "What does it say?" Her voice lowered to a whisper. "It says, 'Don't let him find me.'" Despite every warning, despite their own fear, Ethan and Marissa needed closure. On a cold, foggy morning just before dawn, they returned to the cemetery. The air was still, unnaturally so, and the sky remained a deep charcoal gray. As they approached Caleb's grave, something immediately caught their attention. The action figure, Captain Nova, had been moved again. But this time, it wasn't standing, sitting, or lying down. It was pointing, its tiny plastic arm extended unnaturally toward the dense woods behind the cemetery. Marissa stared at it, eyes wide. "It's showing us something," Driven by a strange mix of fear and desperation, they followed the direction the toy pointed. Trees loomed around them like silent sentinels. Roughly 50 meters in, behind a collapsed stone wall and some thick underbrush, Ethan noticed something odd beneath the dead leaves. A trapdoor, made of old wood, rotting but recently disturbed. He hesitated, but Marissa was already clearing the debris. Together, they pulled the door open. The stench hit them first: dampness, mold, and something far worse. Beneath was a narrow stairway that descended into darkness. They didn't go down. Instead, they called the police. When investigators arrived and entered the underground space, what they found sent shockwaves through the quiet town. A hidden room dimly lit by a single dangling bulb. The walls were covered in childlike drawings, but dark, disturbing ones. Black crayon figures, shadows with no faces. A crude sketch of Caleb's tombstone, and in the corner, a chilling message written in shaky handwriting. "He won't let me leave." Beneath that message, unmistakably in Caleb's own handwriting from an old school assignment, was his name. Among the old toys and broken furniture were remnants of other children's belongings, ones no one had ever reported missing. Authorities couldn't explain it. There was no record of the bunker, no signs of life, yet traces of DNA from multiple unidentified individuals were found inside. The footage, the handwriting, the grave disturbances, all of it pointed to one terrible truth. Something had taken Caleb, or something posing as Caleb had returned. Ethan and Marissa never visited the grave again. But every year, on the anniversary of their son's death, the groundskeeper finds the same toy moved in a new position, and fresh lilies by the grave. No one ever sees who brings them, and no one dares watch the grave after dark.